All right, well, we're going to kick things off here. It is 12 o'clock. Lisa, you want to mute everybody but John and Ken and myself?
Sure.
And so welcome everybody to the June Owner Fireside Chat by Prometis Partners. This is a monthly roundtable discussion designed for owners to better understand some of the things that they need to be looking at in order to not only build value inside of their company and preparing their business to be transferable, but also to certainly maximize the value as much as you possibly can based on your runway when you decide to transition, no matter what the transition is. So these topics are certainly relevant across the board, no matter how mature the business is that you have. You certainly can always sharpen the saw as you kind of move through and take a look at some things. And today we have some great panelists here to have a great conversation with about strategic planning. So let me go ahead and kind of dive in. Ken Sangenario, certainly you can see the resumes, 30 years of experience providing leadership, CFO, CEO type functions, M&A professional, CPA, valuation expert, master's degree in finance. We could go on and on about Ken. This just keeps going on and on. I've known Ken for a few years. He's actually been on the Owner Fireside Chats a while back. And so we certainly love having him back to talk about a very important topic. And then John Lawler, certainly John has had over 40 years in various stages of businesses. Certainly he's a CEO of McGall, is it the Fastano Architects? I hope I didn't just destroy the name of the company. But John is very involved certainly in companies and helping them with their strategic plans, which is why we have him here as a guest, just to kind of go through and ask how do they view a strategic plan, the importance of it, and certainly what are some of the things they like to see in it to make it certainly that it's executable and you can follow through with it. So without any further hold up, let's just go ahead and get started. And so we're going to talk about the power of strategic planning. What does it do for the company? What does it do for your leadership team? And most importantly, what does it also do for your employees and your customers and clients as you have them? So Ken and John, thanks so much for being here today talking about this topic. Really appreciate it.
Sure, our pleasure.
We had a poll question. So Lisa, you want to put the poll question up for everybody to kind of take a stab at it? We got all the results in there, Lisa? Can we put them up on the screen?
We can't see the.
Can't see them, Lisa.
I can.
You can? Huh.
Can everybody see them?
It's evenly split with 4 responses.
I could not see the question or the results, but that's okay.
Yeah.
What are the responses?
So it looked like it was about 50-50.
Yeah, 4 people responded, with one person saying between 51 and 75%, one saying 26 to 50, one saying between 11 and 25, and one saying between 0 and 10. So,
okay, yeah, we got
Okay.
it covered.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide. So Ken and John, let me start the question off with whoever wants to jump at this question is, why does a company even need to consider putting together a strategic plan?
Yeah, John, you want to?
sure, I'll jump on that. Yeah, I think, from our perspective, the power of a strategic plan appears in an organization in a couple different ways. But if you think about what strategic planning is, I mean, one of the important things to know is that strategic planning is not an event. Right? I mean, this is an ongoing competency or capability with an organization that is constantly looking at the external environment and the internal environment and trying to figure out where opportunities are or threats to organizations. It becomes what strategic planning becomes for an organization is a roadmap. And we use the analogy all the time. If you were to go on a trip, you have to pick the destination of your trip. Where do you want to go? By when? How? Etc. And that's what strategic planning does for an organization. It starts to lay out the direction without too much specificity, but enough so that people have an idea of where the organization wants to go and what it would look like. And as a result, it becomes the foundation for alignment. When you have a clear mission, vision, objectives, your strategies, your tactics, and you roll them out to the entire organization, people done well, people understand how they connect to a strategy, right? Or how they connect to a business, what their role and their job or their department, et cetera, how they actually connect to it. And here's the challenging part, we'll talk about this some more further on, but also what they have to do in order to support it and execute on it. The other thing that we really promote from a strategic planning standpoint is the plain and simple fact that done well, strategic planning can be the lever for collective genius. And what we mean by that is in today's modern organizations, we need more people helping solve problems and come up with creative ideas than just the top level leadership, the way it used to be done historically, top-down management, top-down leadership. Whereas now, the power of the organization is in the thousands of employees a company might have and all their ideas and interactions with clients in the marketplace to figure out the best way to do so.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, John. So when we're designing a strategic plan, who should be involved in the design of the strategic plan? Should it be just the owner?
Great question. And our response is absolutely no. If it's just the owner, it's the owner's plan. The whole point of strategic planning is to get your entire, what I would call your key managers or key stakeholders at the management level, the leadership level, together in a room to brainstorm what should be done and how it should be done. Because they have to have input on it. I mean, we all know what it's like when you turn around and someone comes out of just writes up a plan and says, well, here's what we're going to do. Well, with no input in it, you don't have the buy-in into it. And you don't have any, you don't contribute, and therefore it's not your plan. And it really is a flaw when there aren't more people involved. Yeah.
Do you find, John and Ken, that if you don't have leadership in the design of it, then I think, John, you said this, is that really kind of the buy-in and the execution of the plan become much more of an arduous process to get buy-in, because they're like, well, how did you get to that point? I don't think we can do that. Now you start getting more pushback than anything. Those are probably some of the things that can happen, right?
Yeah, I would just add, and in a couple of slides, we'll sort of see where the delineation is between management doing some of the higher level planning elements, and then other aspects of the organization, lower levels in the organization, getting involved to plan the more detailed, the breakdown, the tactics and actions. We'll kind of see where that breaks out. But there is sort of a clear delineation. So, but it's important to get everybody involved before the whole strategic plan is formally adopted. So you get all of that buy-in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would add one other thing. This last bullet here is the entities to commodity held. The point there is that most of the businesses, at least that we deal with, unless you're a mega conglomerate that's creating new markets and new products and those types of things, is the reality is that you're not doing something necessarily newer or earth-shattering. Right? So the challenge is, how do you win when you are effectively very similar to your competitor? So the idea here is that you base it on facts. You really try to understand what your target market and your clients want, or your marketplace wants, and you respond in a way that's different than your competitors. It's not that, look, if I'm in the baking business, it's not like there aren't other bakers, right? How do I really be radically different? It's more about executing in a way that people value more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make, John, because you can always tell when you connect with any company that has done some strategic planning and has high level and really good leadership, is that when you walk in or you're talking to that company or you're doing a virtual meeting with them, you can tell how well they're connected, that they're all on the same page. And it kind of takes me back when I was growing up, is like, I know my parents never wrote a strategic plan, but I think now that they actually might have, because we didn't have cell phones back then, and they always knew what the other person was doing no matter what was going on. So there had some kind of strategy as to what was going on. So before I get going with the conversation, I want to remind everybody that this is an interactive conversation that we have for all of you also. So we really encourage you to ask questions. There is a chat box up at the top of your screen. You can click on that. I do have the chat box open, so certainly write your questions in there or comments. We certainly want to make sure that they're included into this conversation to answer any questions that you have or make any comments that you have. So please feel free to open up the chat and go from there. So, so if a company doesn't have a strategic plan and they just kind of move through, the economies are solid and they're kind of growing, they have some clientele, where do you normally see where the impact of not having a strategic plan really impacts them in a negative way?
Well, Vince, I would answer that by almost describing what the attributes of the company are when they have a really strong strategic planning competency and process. You see a focus, a clarity, a discipline throughout the organization, and a level of efficiency, because people aren't wasting their time working on areas that they personally may think are being helpful, but in reality aren't really moving the company forward. They're not moving the needle. So when you see companies, and most companies, probably 95% of the companies, have very little or no strategic planning process and very little strategic planning competency, you see the opposite of that. You see people at all levels, from senior management all the way down to lower levels in the company. You see them filling their days, filling their time with tasks that they think are important or they think are helpful, all with good intentions, at least generally all with good intentions, but very often not moving the needle at all for where the company is trying to go, because they don't know where the company is trying to go. So you see a lot of inefficiency that way, and you see a lack of focus, a lack of discipline. You see a lot of times you see what I call a flavor of the week objectives for what people are working on. It's whatever happens to capture the attention of the owner or the CEO that week. And it's the owners have the proverbial shiny dime syndrome, where something captures their imagination or their attention, and they create a mandate and they create a whole task and start allocating people to go research or work on something. And then a week later, they've forgotten that they've even done that and they're on to something else. And you just see a lot of wheel spinning and frustration among teams and organizations, because they know that a lot of the time they're spending is wasted. And that all goes away with a proper strategic plan, because a proper strategic plan gives people throughout all levels of the organization the ability to say no to these shiny dime or flavor of the week kind of projects, because they can challenge back and say, look, this is the plan that we all agreed, these are the priorities. Where does this fit? Or does it fit? If it fits, we need to put it back through the strategic planning process and figure out what this will displace that we've already agreed to focus on. So this planning process and competency, it's a mindset, it's a way, it's a filter system, it's a way of thinking about prioritizing and making day-to-day business decisions and allocating resources.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ken. John, did you want to add anything, or?
Well, I think, to Ken's point, and I think to your original question, one of the most important reasons for doing this, or justifications to a company, is to position it for long-term sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, if you're not interested and worried about the long-term sustainability of your company, don't do this. Right? But as things are going away, things are going fine, business is good. Well, that's not what you're anticipating. What you're doing is preparing the organization for future growth and changes that are going to come in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of always go back. I mean, certainly the most recent time would have been, certainly the COVID disruption is, I think it helps people understand how well the company can really pivot, because they have really good critical thinking inside of the company, because they've already kind of started doing this in the company, so they know how to maneuver stuff. It doesn't make the time. It allows you to kind of go through to say, where else can we go and what can we do from a survival perspective to keep our business moving and to keep it as profitable as we possibly can, whether it's a pandemic or it's an economic downturn, recession, or something of that nature, right? I mean, it gives you that direction, kind of a document that says, hey, here's the direction we're going, here's our priorities, here's our 3 to 5 priorities over a period of time, and here's what we need to be doing daily or quarterly to make sure that we hit these things so that we can keep this company moving. And that usually will separate you from, I'm going to guess, at least 90% of your competition. What are some of the statistics? 85% or so of companies today spend less than an hour a month on their strategic plan?
Click to the next slide and you'll see some really interesting statistics.
Yeah,
So
I'd like everybody just kind of take a minute and read these. These are pretty impactful.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think the top one is really, it just always strikes me, because you go across and you see companies that have actually done a plan, but they don't really do anything with it.
Yeah.
And they're not using it to help them make decisions. 95% of companies, employees don't even understand what the strategy is. I mean, this is a great culture builder for companies. When people want to come on board, what a great onboarding is to help share an overview of the strategic plan. And 90% of businesses fail to meet their strategic targets is because they don't really, what are the targets and how is everybody going to execute them? Yeah.
Yeah. And these are,
Go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
these statistics, they come from Harvard Business Review, but I think John and I could have probably quoted these statistics without even reading the article, because it's what we've been seeing for the last 10 years. When we go visit companies, these are about the percentages that you see. 90% of companies fail to meet their growth objectives or their strategic targets. You see companies spending little to no time at all on strategic planning. There's another statistic that I've seen over the years, but I didn't put it on here because I didn't have the source of where it came from. But it says that the companies with a very clear picture of where they're trying to go and how they're going to get there. So in other words, with a really well-developed and executed strategic plan, tend to be 70% more successful than companies without. So, that's just the flip side of this. It just makes such a huge difference in company results when they have a strategic planning competency.
Yeah, and I would suspect that you gentlemen would put this at probably the very top of the list of one of the first things that companies should do when they're starting a company is developing their strategic plan once they kind of get moving?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
They don't know where they want to go. Isn't it a Yogi Berra-ism, a yogiism, something about, if we don't know where we're trying to go, then every path will lead us there, or something like that.
yeah, right. Most likely. Let's go to the next slide, Lisa. So when we start to take at why we talked a little bit about why the strategic plan, senior leaders certainly don't see the value. It's misunderstood. It takes too long. Unsafe environment, strong personalities, fact-based, everyday business gets in the way. I'd like to add another one to that list of why people may not do it. And that might be that, and then maybe it's a couple. One, the owner doesn't want to, they feel like they're giving up control when they do that. And then especially when it comes to the financial piece of the strategic planning is they feel like if they let that kind of like that cat out of the bag, that they're really exposing themselves to say, now they get to know my personal business. How would you guys approach a business owner that kind of looked at it that way?
Well, that sounds more like a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
And they're not concerned about the long-term sustainability of the organization or the people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think if I were to talk to that owner, I would say, okay, so how do you get out? When it comes time for you to leave the business, how are you going to do that? Can you convert this wonderful business to some type of wealth for yourself? Are you able to do that? Because if you're not willing to open up and let people see what it's all about, then it eventually will just go away.
Great point, John.
I think the other thing to think about is, let's not kid ourselves. At least for Ken and I, we're in the small to medium-sized business market segment, right? And so many of those businesses are started by people who had a job that grew it into a business, right? You get a lot of businesses where you're really good at something, or an individual's good at something, and they turn it into a business. Well, strategy is a corporate word. Executive leadership is corporate words. And they look at some of this stuff and say, that's for big companies. We don't need to do that. And it's just, it's flawed reasoning. Right? I think it's really, the bullet point, that number 2, it's misunderstood. It's really, what we find is companies find it so eye-opening to go through the initial planning process to think about their business in ways that they never thought about it before, as how they position in the market and how they compete and how they get engaged and how they win and what their organization needs to look like. Mm-hmm. So, and the fact that people just have never done it. You talk to a lot of small and medium-sized business owners, they've never gone through planning before. They've never been taught how to do it. They don't really, a lot of them didn't go to MBA schools or things like that. So it's not something they're comfortable with or passionate about.
And I would just add to everything John just said, with that some business owners are totally comfortable sharing everything financially with their employees. Some are uncomfortable sharing anything, but those are the two extremes. Most are comfortable sharing some kind of financial metrics, but maybe not the entire picture. They may be comfortable sharing certain financial targets, but they're not going to, let everybody have access to the payroll register or, things like that. And that's fine. I think the key is to find the comfort zone of where the owner is as a starting point and work with that. And as time goes on and they start seeing the impact that this strategic planning process and discipline can have on their company, they may become more comfortable sharing additional information as time goes on. But you can't sort of, force them right out of the gate to start sharing everything, because the resistance walls will go up.
Yeah, we have a question, Bob. I know you got your hand up in the thing. If you want to unmute your computer and ask your question.
Yeah, one, I think I I forget who it was. Maybe it was Ken mentioned the term a lifestyle business. What is a lifestyle business? I've never heard that before.
So I mentioned that, this is John, and
Yeah.
a lifestyle business is a business that's designed in a way to support the lifestyle of the owner.
Okay.
All the money goes to their cars or their retirement or their country club or whatever, but it's all about the owner typically. And it's not designed around a long-term sustainable company.
Yeah, it's not designed to spread the intellectual knowledge throughout the whole company so that the company could be transferred, ownership could be transferred or sold in the future. All the intellectual knowledge and property and control usually resides in one person, being the owner. And as John said, financially, they run everything through the business. They run all their personal travel. They run all their cars, their spouse's cars, their country club, the vacation home. It all runs through the business because it's just to support their lifestyle. It's not to build a company that's a standalone, long-term, viable, sustainable company.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, great question. I think it's I think it's important to certainly understand, the different types of companies, and certainly, lifestyle businesses are out there. And it's just, strategic plan is probably not going to be a good fit for them. Just because of what John and both Ken had expressed, I'd just be saying the same thing, so I won't repeat it. But these are just some of the things that really take a look at why business owners may not really do a strategic plan. Certainly fear is in there and whatnot, but certainly there are things that you really want to take a look at when you're looking to do a strategic plan. So let's go to the next slide, Lisa, please. So, gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about the process. We have talked before, the process for a strategic plan should take somewhere between 3 to 6 months to develop over a period of time. I think a lot of that is really going to be based on the experience of the owner and the leadership team. And if they've done one before and they understand and have a clear vision of what they're doing, sometimes things can move a little bit quicker. And it's not how fast you do them, it's the quality of it. But can you just kind of walk our listeners through and the people attending today, kind of like, what do they see here and how do we get to this laid out perspective of the strategic planning?
Yeah, it's a pretty packed slide here. But if you focus for just a minute on the middle piece, the mission, vision, value SWOT, and so forth down through actions, that's the framework itself for what we believe to be an effective strategic planning process. And if you were to Google the visions, the VMOST, so flip vision and mission, VMOST, VMOST, you'd probably find hundreds of articles on that strategic planning framework. So this has been in that part of this framework has been in the public domain for a long time. When John and I started working with it and using it with companies 10 years ago, eventually we used it as the VMOS framework for a while, but eventually we evolved that to make it more impactful and more effective. And one thing we did was to flip the mission and vision, because the framework went vision first and mission second. And we flipped that because we thought it was more effective. Then we added values, and SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's just another analysis on the company. And then we go down below tactics, and we break it down into even smaller bite-sized pieces for the organization to be able to adopt and digest and execute. But the middle part is the framework. What you see on the left side are the timelines that apply to each layer in this framework. So think of this framework as a multi-layered filter system for decision-making, prioritizing, allocating of resources, focus and discipline and so forth. And so on the left side, you see the timelines that apply to each layer in this filter system. So mission, vision, and values are established with kind of a longer term, we always say like a 5-year outlook for mission, vision, and values. And just to say that very simply, mission is why the company exists. What would the world miss if the company was gone tomorrow? It's the heart and soul of the company. Vision is more of what do we want to look like as a company when we grow up? What do we want to look like in 5 years? And then values are sort of, what do we stand for as a company? What are the values that we are adopting that are ironclad, non-negotiable, and really important in maintaining our employee relationships, our customer relationships, our supplier relationships? And so those are longer term attributes that don't really change at all over, say, the 5-year outlook. And then current SWOT is a current state. That's more of an analysis of where the company is today. And then we start developing objectives and strategies and tactics. These are, as you go further down, they become smaller and smaller bite size. And so objectives and strategies have more of a 3 to 5 year lookout. Tactics and actions are smaller bite sizes of the objectives. Those are more 1 to 2 year outlooks. And then actions are 3 to 12 months. You can even go below actions. We go one level below, called tasks, which are 30, 60, 90-day kind of sprints. And the further down you go on the framework, the deeper you're pushing this into the organization, the more people that you're getting involved, the more people whose opinions you're asking about how do we accomplish some of the higher level objectives and how do we move the company toward its mission and vision. And when you push this all the way down through the organization, and everybody in the organization can see how their roles, as John mentioned earlier, how their roles connect to the overall strategic plan, they naturally become more focused and more disciplined, and they have a better understanding and better buy-in, better engagement as to how they are adding value to the whole company. So it just gets everybody, top to bottom, really tightly aligned in the company. And then you can see that horizontal line. So Vince, to your question earlier about, how many people or who in the organization do you get involved in this? You can see the 3 to 5 year elements of the framework are mostly developed by management. So that's senior management, usually the owner, CEO, and a leadership team. But the further you go down into the organization, the more people you get involved. So that's the tactics, actions, and if you go down to tasks, the tasks also. And that's more of like your annual operating plan where you're including staff throughout the company. And it all rolls up from that point, from the bottom up. So you're developing it from the top down, but you're executing it from the bottom up. So that's kind of a quick description. This is like it seems like a simple framework that you may wonder, well, why would this take 3 to 6 months to develop this and start executing it? Because I just kind of explained it in 5 minutes, but it's like I use the analogy, this is like a very powerful power tool, like a big table saw, big, elaborate, complex table saw, that it looks easy. And if you know what you're doing with it, it is easy and very impactful and can make your life a lot easier. But if you don't know how to use it and you just take this framework and start trying to run with it, like if you just go and buy a table saw off the rack at Home Depot and you've never used one before, well, you could actually cause a lot more damage if you don't know what you're doing with it. So I would just caution everybody, it's a very powerful framework here. And if you'd like to use it, learn more about it, connect with Vince and make sure that you know how to execute, because there's a lot that goes into each one of these layers.
Yeah, there certainly is. So for those attending today, it's interesting. You just go back a slide, Lisa. Thank you. It's interesting, you know, when you ask a group of people why they exist, why does the company exist, why are we here? You know, if sometimes it takes a little bit of time to really kind of get into a flow of like, well, gee, why do we really exist? Right? Why are we here? Right? It's not going to be just to collect a paycheck. It's more about why is the company here? What's the impact here? And so some of these things can take, usually when you're planning, you would do like an every other week for a half a day. And sometimes a mission statement can take more than a half a day to actually get to where everybody agrees on it. Because when you're using the ownership and the leadership team, depending on how big that is, you know, everybody has to agree on it because you want everyone with the same message as you kind of go through it. One thing that we do recommend is, you notice under the current status of SWOT, we do suggest that you update your SWOT analysis on an annual basis.
Mhm.
And most of the SWOT items that are put in there should be part of your actions and your tasks. And that's why you do it before you do your objectives, so you kind of know where your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. So it really kind of helps you design what those are and kind of move forward. So, John, did you have anything on this?
Yeah, I was just going to add that the split here on this page, where the upper part is management long-term and the bottom part is, you know, the entire organization, is there's some real power in that, right? If you think about one of the most common challenges we have in business today is finding employees and finding employees that want to do and deliver on what we do as an organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
What employees, you know, people that work for a particular company, they want the upper part. They need it. They expect it of the company to be able to tell them those things. What they don't want to be told is how to do everything. And that's the real power of this process. So set a direction, set the objectives, let everybody know what we're all about as a company. It attracts people that want to be involved in that type of business. It attracts the right type of talent, those types of things. It helps, as Ken alluded to earlier, it makes decision-making easier, your organization is more efficient, those types of things. But the planning, the operating plan and the implementation is delegated to the people in the company who are best suited and with the most experience to figure out how to do certain parts of this. Right?
Yep.
So it engages those talented people in your organization, the people that want to contribute and want to be part of it. So it's a really powerful model.
And can I just elaborate on something John just said a little bit more? John commented that it makes decision-making easier. And I think that's worth a little bit more description, because what you see in a lot of companies that don't have effective strategic plans or processes is that every time there's a challenge in the company, people at lower levels have to go to their superiors in the company to get direction, to get an answer, to get a resolution. And that's very inefficient. It's a very inefficient way to run a company. And it makes the people at middle and lower levels in the company feel sort of less valued, because they don't have the authority to solve problems themselves without getting direction and permission and so forth. If you have a really well-developed, effective strategic plan, and everybody in the company understands what's above that horizontal line, the mission, the vision, the values, et cetera, objectives, then they can use that as a filter system for decision-making at lower levels. So it can prevent the requirement that they have to go to their superior for direction or permission, or if they get a challenge from a customer or a supplier, they can just sort of think through, well, okay, what decision would be consistent with our mission, vision, values, objectives, and so forth, and they can make that decision with confidence. And the higher levels of management in the company will have the confidence to let them do that. So it sort of removes a lot of friction in the way the company runs. It pushes decision-making down. It lets management sort of rise up out of the weeds so they can focus more on higher level thinking for the company and not be sucked down into the weeds of making all these day-to-day decisions for everybody in the organization. So I think that really is a powerful aspect of this.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I know as some of you owners are looking at this, that this might seem a bit daunting or arduous to go through this process or whatnot. And it really becomes a lot more engaging and empowering as you go through it. And it certainly helps to, as was said before, is it really gives the company kind of like a new sense of energy. The other thing that you really want to think about is, as we started the conversation at the very beginning, at some point, every owner is going to transition out of their business, and that business is going to be either gifted or sold to kids, sold to a key person, sold to a strategic buyer. If they're a really good company, they might actually even get a private equity offer that is reasonable that they might want to take, or they may even want to start taking a look at an ESOP plan. What better way to turn over a business and make it transferable than to have a written strategic plan and framework that has been updated on a regular basis with the input of not only your leadership team, but your people? Because now that really makes that company, I would think, even more valuable and easier to transfer to a new owner, to be able to move in and kind of take the steering wheel and take it to the level that they want to take it to also. You know, certainly they will modify it in the way they have it, but they see that you have some direction and plan, which helps them understand what the company is really about. So let's go to the next slide, Lisa. That was just some great discussion there on that piece right there, of really kind of what does a strategic plan do and what is it again. So let's talk, guys, a little bit about, you know, putting this all together, tying it all together, certainly documentation, communication, tracking, and support. So John or Ken, just jump in and say, like, how does this actually work for a company and the owner and everybody involved? How do you do this from documentation down to support?
John, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So from a documentation standpoint, it's an ongoing process it's an ongoing part of the process, right? What we like to capture is all the ideas that might have been, that did come up throughout the brainstorming process on the various topics we talked about, whether it's the strategies or the objectives and those types of things. And capture the fact, not only why we chose, or the company chooses a particular strategy or an objective, but also why they didn't choose others, right? This becomes part of the, so that a year or two down the road or 3 years down the road, they're like, why didn't we do this? And you go back to it and say, well, we talked about that and we thought about it, and here are the pros and cons, and we decided to do it this way. So you have that. And it also gives you the ammunition for the next step, which is communication. Because when you roll it out to the organization, you know, there's a bunch of ways to do that. We have ideas on how to do it. We can talk about this all day long, but the idea is to get it out into the organization as quickly as you can in a way that's meaningful to the people that are hearing it. Talking to them as individuals as to how they connect to the overall strategic plan and where the company's going and those types of things. And you have to do it multiple times, multiple ways, and keep repeating it and keep repeating it and keep repeating it. It's not something like, you know, in 2021 we said this, in 2022 we say a completely different thing. No, you have to say that for time and time and time again. It's the intro to everything. And it really becomes the backbone. Tracking
is like communicating to children.
Go ahead.
Sorry. It's like communicating to children. You have to keep like repeating and repeating and reinforcing, like every day, every week, every month, and you might say the same thing 100 times. Eventually, it sinks in, but it really takes that kind of level of repetition and reinforcement. Sorry, John.
No, that's okay. I think you raised a good point about that reinforcing it. And I think the other thing to think about is, look, a lot of small to medium-sized businesses are run by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs like to think about the next thing or the new thing so it's a challenge for them to stick to a plan over time. It's different, right? And it's might be another reason why they aren't inclined to do it, because it kind of limits them in a way, but it channels the organization, the power of the organization, the alignment of the organization, and the results. So tracking is always interesting. Tracking has to become part of your DNA as an organization. It's really how you manage a business, right? It's not only about the tracking of the plan, but the progress on your objectives and the incremental tasks and actions that have been accomplished, and then also what's coming next. Right? And then the support part is, for us, it's part of the service we provide clients over the long term. It's making sure that we're always there and reminding them of, okay, you've accomplished this, let's move on to the next one. Let's we've got to re-up our tasks and actions. We've got to revisit our strategies. We're 2 years into this. How are we doing on our progress? Should we think about, are you ahead of schedule or behind schedule, and how do you tweak it? So it's, in many ways, it's an outside voice that helps companies stay on track and be aware and just bring it back to the surface again on a regular basis.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
I'm just going to add to that last support part. There is an internal component to the support, and that is the organization. It needs to be reinforced that they have to support each other as well. So a lot of times when you're in the tracking process and there are agreed upon deadlines for a lot of different small bite-sized chunks of initiatives, and people are held accountable for meeting their deadlines, a lot of times people will fall behind their deadlines because everyday life happens and things get in the way and whatever. It's important when that happens for their peers and their colleagues in the company to pick them up and not just let them fall further and further behind. So that's part of the cultural development, that this is like all for one and one for all kind of approach from a cultural standpoint. People need to be helping each other. If they see a colleague slipping on their deadlines or falling behind, they need to step in and either help them or help them figure out what's getting in the way and maybe take some other things off their plates or what have you. It is a team effort. This is not just a bunch of individuals running around doing their assignments and hoping that it all comes together. They have to help each other and play as a team, and then the outside set of eyes monitoring and coaching and making sure that it making sure the collaboration is happening and so forth. So they're both. It's both.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Ken and I do another workshop around the 5 dysfunctions of a team. As maybe you've heard of that book by Paul Lencioni. But that's a classic example where you've done this plan and everybody else goes back to their silos and they start to fall down on their own versus working as a team to say, okay, how do we make sure that no one's left on an island and that we're all working together for the common objective. So yeah, just another great reference point. And I feel like we're talking too much. I would love to take the group to ask any questions or anything. I don't know how you want to do that.
Yeah. Oh, no. Well, it's open to everybody. Please ask your questions through the chat, or if you want me to unmute you, just raise your hand or so, or just unmute and go ahead and ask your question. Because this is really built around you, and it's here for you to ask the questions that certainly that you might have, you've been thinking through, if you're looking at strategic planning. I think let's go back to that one slide there, Lisa, just that we were just on, if you don't mind. I find as you go through this process, certainly trying to get a group of people in a company that have never done a strategic plan to do a strategic plan, to get them to go through that process. Sometimes it'll be a little slow to get started, and it picks up some speed to go through the mission, vision, values. Then they get to the SWOT, and they really start to pick up some momentum, and they get things knocked out, and they're really happy with where they're at. And then this is such a a second critical piece. It's not more important. It's just so critical to the documentation of really kind of assigning those objectives to people, and what are the metrics that we're really going to be tracking over a period of time to make sure that we're doing it. And then the other thing is really the communication of kind of like a company-wide rollout of look, we've spent some time and we've developed a strategic plan, and we want to share that with everybody and allow for some Q&A for people so that they can get a really good understanding and start to get some buy-in. I like to explain it to businesses and owners. I say, look, when you started the business, and to your point, John, maybe it was a job when you started it. And certainly there could have been some challenges and some errors that you did when you first started it, and you went back and you did things better. When you start doing a strategic plan, if you haven't done it before, then once you start doing it, you kind of say, well, hey, look, here's how we could do it better. So we've got this now, I've got it in front of me. Now, how can I make it even better, right? So there's a lot of analogies that you can utilize. It may not be the perfect one, the first rollout, but it's certainly with the effort and execution of the team and the company, it ultimately will be a great plan as you go through a period of time and you get it to that level. But documentation, communication, tracking goes back to, I think, your comment, John, with 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. When you take a look at Patrick Leoncini's, the trust and the conflict and, accountability and commitment and results, you have to be able to have that. And when you're tracking, you're going to have you better have a fair amount of trust, because you're going to have a whole lot of conflict, and there better be a whole lot of accountability as you go through it in order to get your results. So that's a whole lot to get there. So I think it's awesome. So do we have another poll question, Lisa? Okay, so what percentage of companies do you believe would significantly benefit from a strategic planning process?
Ken and I shouldn't answer, we're biased.
Yes. So it looks like more than 75%. 5 people said more than 75%. Would you gentlemen agree?
Absolutely. We think every
Yeah.
company.
Yeah, most definitely.
What's that, John?
I said, yes, we think every company should do it.
Yeah, we really do.
There's different levels of complexity in which you do it, but every company from its infancy on through its evolution should do it. And I think, one of the things just to reinforce here is it says strategic planning process. This is part of the DNA of a business. We look at it as an overall competency of a company to continuously evolve the company through strategic planning. It's the ability to be able to be externally aware of what's going on around you in the world and your competitors and what clients want, as well as your internal capabilities and competencies to deliver on that.
Yeah, great point. Well, we're gonna wrap up. John and Ken, we want to thank you so much for being here today. I hope everybody got some really good information out of here, because it took some planning to get these 2 gentlemen here today. They're out on the East Coast in Boston. They're very busy, so we really appreciate them taking some time out to visit with us and share their experiences and their intelligence as they've gone through this. So let's go to the next slide, Lisa. Thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome.
Some of the takeaways we think that you should have really gotten from here is certainly strategic planning creates certainly a framework to align the entire organization. It creates a multi-layered filtered system for decision making at every level inside of the company. Everything starts and flows from an effective mission vision of the company, and certainly breaking down some of the major objectives into more bite-sized chunks in critical successful execution. And then certainly last but not least is having a facilitator to guide the execution of strategic plans certainly significantly increases its success certainly in who's involved and getting input from everybody and being able to manage that process to make sure it gets to the level that it really could get to. So it is very helpful to have that. Let's go to the next slide, Lisa. So I want to just kind of stop there before we kind of move on and get ready to close out. Does anybody have any questions for myself, for John, for Ken? Would you like to unmute and ask your questions? Put them in the chat box. In just a minute, no questions? Okay, Lisa, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so in July, on the 19th, we are going to be talking to Paul Damon from Family Capital Management about charitable contributions for businesses. How can it effectively help you reduce your taxes on a sale of a business? Certainly what you can do for your community and for foundations as you kind of go through it. So again, John and Ken, we want to thank you very much for being here today. Really appreciate you sharing all of your insight and experiences with us. This has been recorded for those that are on here, and it will be up on our YouTube probably. I think it's usually within a day that we have it up on there. And so you can go to our YouTube site and you can pull it right off there, and you can listen to it either in bits and pieces. Certainly share it with your team and use it as a conversation piece. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. Hope to see you in July, and hope everybody has a great week. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.